We've got an Amiga CD32 to look at this week. The world's first 32-bit console, and indeed 32 years old, being released in 1993. And while this machine does still turn on, there's unfortunately no sound and no activity from the disk. Now, like all these machines of the era, this one needs a recap, so that's where we're going to start. So we need to get this apart, but just while I'm doing that, let me also tell you about Amiga Belfast. A new user group meet. We're back again for 2025, meeting on the 1st of November at the May building in Belfast city centre. That's the old Tesco building for anyone local. We'll be there between 10 AM and 6 PM. Everyone is more than welcome. You can even bring along your Amigas to show if you want. And free tickets are available over on the Retro directory. I'll leave a link to it down in the video's description. Or you can use the QR code that I'll stick on screen now. We had a great time last year. There was about 15-20 of us there for most of the day, and then just lots of people calling in between. I think there's currently 26 tickets are gone, so it is already shaping up to be a bigger event than last year, but anyone else who would be interested is more than welcome. Now, this is one of the worst things about working in a CD32, getting this ribbon out, because it is next to near impossible to get something down in here to undo this latch on the motherboard that's holding the ribbon in place. I might be able to get it with my tweezers. That side's easy enough to get up. It's the other side though. There, got it out okay. And the front panel just disconnects. Right. Just need to get the board out. Lots of capacitors on here to change, but there's also some in the CD drive to change as well. Shielding on this is quite badly rusted. In fact, the whole machine is pretty much filthy. It seems as if it's maybe been left in a roof space or a garage or something like that for quite a considerable length of time. I just wonder what condition the board will be in. Hopefully the capacitors haven't done too much damage. And you know what? Other than being very dusty, it actually doesn't look too bad. I'll give the board a bit of a clean in a minute just before we do the recap. But one thing that I want to point out here. CD32 board is renowned for having a couple of capacitors in backwards. These two through-hole caps, these are usually installed backwards, and the reason I say it like that is because in this machine, much like it was actually in my own CD32, those two factory capacitors, they are installed correctly. So everyone always talks about the through-hole caps beside the power switch, they're installed backwards and need to go in the opposite way around. That's not always the case. The correct orientation for them is for the negative side, or the side with the stripe on it there, to be pointing towards the power switch. That is ground on that side, and we can prove it using the multimeter. So that one should be ground, which it is, and that one should be ground, which it is. On this board, those two caps have been installed correctly. Let's start by removing the through-hole bits first. Just three capacitors. One there and one there. That's the two at the power switch. And then there's another one over here somewhere. Just there between those 2 points. It may be time to invest in a new desoldering gun. This one just doesn't seem to have the ability anymore to heat PCBs properly. It always struggles to desolder now, especially on these large ground planes. Hence why I have to use the the soldering iron alongside it. It's the only way I can get enough heat in. But inevitably when I do that, I end up scratching the solder mask slightly. Right, that thing is essentially useless, so I think I'll just have to try and walk these out a bit. Now this is interesting, because despite the fact that those two through-hole caps were fitted correctly on this board, and I'm 99% sure those are the factory capacitors, but despite that, the silk screen markings, they're still incorrect. You can see the positive symbol there and there, suggesting that those caps should be installed the other way around. We know better. We know they should be installed as they were. So it must have been picked up at the factory at some point, and on some of these boards, like my own Rev 3 CD32, the caps were fitted correctly. We have looked at another one of these though in the past, another Rev 3, and on that these caps were fitted the wrong way around. The other thing that you'll notice there is that there's positions for surface mount caps, actually in all three positions where the through-hole caps were. On the last one of these I did on the channel, I actually did fit the surface mount version of the caps there, but I probably would advise against doing that. The reason I say so is because when I returned that machine to its owner, he mistakenly inserted his expansion here and knocked the capacitor, ripping up that pad. Now he was able to fix that himself by just removing the cap and fitting a through-hole cap, but the through-hole cap would have more strength for a misinserted expansion. You know, it'll take a knock from it, whereas the surface mount cap is probably more likely to damage the board. So yeah, just replace like for like, and that's what we'll be doing with the capacitor kit that comes from Amiga Kit. We're going to be using polymer capacitors on this one. I'm just going to go ahead though and remove all the other caps. Like always, we will introduce a little bit of clean solder first of all. So I'm just going to go around all of these and just dab a little bit of fresh solder into all these joints, especially the ones that are showing a little bit of corrosion. These two here, for example, especially that one is quite corroded, although nothing to do with the missing audio. That one is actually connected to the video side of things. That's the video DAC, or the composite encoder, should I say, on this board. The audio side of this board is all down here, and certainly the solder points on those capacitors, they all look fine, but who knows, they might be dead. I would say it's the most likely reason why there's no sound. There's absolutely no sound whatsoever, not even a whisper, not even static out of this thing. It is just silent. So yeah, enough waffling. Let's get all these caps off and replaced. A little bit of capping tape there, just to help protect some of the plastic bits. And we're going to be using hot air to try and take off all the old caps. That's a lot of caps. I was running hot air there at 350, just at maximum airspeed. So the board is kind of toasty at the minute. I'm just going to leave it to cool down for a minute. Then we'll go over all of this with some solder braid just to clean up those pads. Hit it all with a bit of IPA, and then we can think about putting the new capacitors on. That's it all cleaned up, ready for the new caps. One thing I have noticed though is that this board has a bit of a bend in it. It is slightly bananaed there. That seems more straight to me, but the board, yeah, it's slightly twisted. Hopefully that's not a problem. But everything is nice and clean. There's absolutely no signs of damage anywhere. All the vias and all look very clean. In fact, there was no real smell, you know, that sort of fishy smell. There was none of that when taking the old caps off. So I do think we are catching this just in time. Let's get these new ones on. And in no particular order, I pulled out this series. They're labeled C. They are all 100 nanofarad. There should be 9 of them, and they go in those positions. but I'll just use PCB Explorer in the background just to identify exactly where all of those are. It'll save me hunting across the board for them. So the first one there is C281, and that is that one up there. Now, you've seen me do this a million times before, so we don't really need to go over it again. But you can see the outline of the capacitor there. The positive side of the cap, looking at the silk screen, is the side with the two chamfered corners, negative side being the side with a straight edge. That is the same for the cap itself. The base of it has like chamfered corners on the positive side, and the negative side has the straight edge and also that solid line there. So it wants to sit something like that. Let's go in with a little bit of flux and let's try and get it stuck down. That's the positive side done. And that's the negative side. One down. Lots still to do. Right, 239. That one goes there. That's all the new caps fitted, just need to clean around it, but I'm eager to know if that's fixed any of the problems. Still seems to start up okay, but there's still no sound. Now, I don't have the drive hooked up, obviously, but one thing at a time, let's try and figure out why it's not making noises. So, I want to check the obvious first of all. Is Paula trying to make a noise? Left and right channels can be found on that corner of the chip, the two corner pins. But let's just see if anything comes up on the scope. And yeah, I can see a little bit of activity there. There it is. That is going to be the jingle playing. So at least we know Paula, she's trying to do something, but there's nothing coming out of the speakers. So pull up the schematic for the CD32. This is the audio section here, and yeah, it's a bit of a mess compared to the other machines. Left and right there, that is the left and right audio coming from Paula. This bit is sort of similar to what you would find on your typical Amiga. There's your low pass filter stuff, and that is the op amp. But it's also mixed with CD audio through another amp, and finally to the output. It also branches down here though to the earphone jack. I suppose, speaking of which, if we do hook this up quickly, is there any sound coming out of these? Yes, there is, but it is very, very quiet. And it does all sound correct. It's just a whisper. So that makes me think that everything's working, just the levels aren't right. I wonder, do we have a voltage problem? This op amp here, U15B, if we scroll on down through the schematics, it is running off 12 volt rail. We should see 12 volts on pin 8 of 15B, which is that IC. Pin 8 would be this one, the bottom right. And we're only seeing 1.5 volts. Now granted, okay, it does go through a resistor there, but that doesn't seem right. Where does 12 volts actually come into the machine? We can pick it up actually on the power switch. If we look at PCB Explorer, that is 12 volt. And again, that's just 1.5 volts. So something is nuking the 12 volt rail. And that might also actually explain why the CD is not working. 12 volt is definitely going to that CD drive. This seems to be our problem. But where all does 12 volt go on the board here? We can just search for it on the schematics. There's only 8 references to it. So we'll start at the start. That is on the power supply to the CD drive. It's referenced here twice, just 2 variations of footprints. And I suppose there could potentially be a problem there. I mean, if there was something shorted in that transistor, shorting that to ground. In fact, let's just see, is there a short to ground on the 12 volt rail? No, doesn't seem to be. Well, it's reading about 14K there, hardly a short. So I don't really think that's a problem. Where else can we find 12 volt on the schematic? That is just the edge connector. It appears on that a couple of times. Then there's the power input, and then just the audio stuff. There's a supply to U32, and that's applied to U15B, and I suppose 15A as well, actually. There are a couple of ceramics involved there. C15B and C32. Where are they on the board? C15B is on the bottom side, just there. And the other one was C32, which is just there. Those two. I know that nothing is showing sorted on the multimeter there, but I wonder if it would be worth taking a look at them through the thermal camera. So that's one of them at that position, just at the end of my finger. That's the other one there. Let's turn this board on. And yeah, the board itself is heating up, but no signs of those ceramics getting hot, so I don't think we have any issues there. The board itself is getting quite warm quite quickly. I suppose I have had it on there, but yeah, it's just the chips getting warm. And yeah, none of those ICs I was talking about, they're not really getting hot, are they? No, there's nothing there worth talking about at all. In fact, those three ICs are stone cold, probably because they're not getting the voltage that they're meant to. So what could possibly be pulling the 12 volt rail down? I suppose what we should maybe do here is just try to isolate a few things. Try and isolate different sections of the 12 volt rail just to see if it comes back up again. There is one more reference to 12 volt actually in the schematics. Let's just check that at video decoupling. But because it's in this sort of hatched box here, that's not used. None of those components are fitted. The 7805 at position XU2, that is there, just in the middle of the board. You can see none of that is fitted. So I suppose we will take this back to the start. Let's first of all try and isolate this section. Let's remove resistor 766. 1K resistor on the bottom of the board, that one. Okay, with that removed, does that make any difference to our 12 volt rail? It brought it up a little bit, but not much. 1.6 volts. It's still not right. So it has to be something in that audio section. How about we try and remove those two ceramics? C32. C15B, and I suppose there's another one there, actually C15A, there's three of them. Let's just try C32 on its own first of all. Does that make any difference? Just try and measure the 12 volt rail on the bottom here. No, still just the same. At 1.64 and still no sound. So let's just remove those other two, 15B and 15A. No, not that one. This one. Does that make any difference to the voltage? Nope, no difference whatsoever. Still just 1.6 volts. So yeah, it's not any of that. Before we go any further, I'm just going to put those passives back on. I can guarantee you that you've never seen this before. How this machine ever worked from new, I will never know. But I was trying to trace the 12 volt rail, and we've been testing it from the switch, but then I sort of thought to myself, well, what about before the switch? You know, it plugs in to the board here. Well, see this pin, which is just sitting there. There's no actual solder in the hole that it's connected to. If I go on to the pin, that's the 12 volt. If I try to go on to just the hole, not touching the pin, there's our 1.5, 1.6. So has this machine always had a problem with this 12 volt rail? Has it always had issues reading discs and playing audio? Because it seems to me as if there's no solder in that joint. It seems as if there's never been any solder in that joint. And that is definitely the original connector on the motherboard here. I mean, it's covered in dust, just like everything else is. I mean, there's no way it's that simple, is it? Is it that simple? There was a more convincing thud there from the speaker when it was turned on. And yeah, there's the jingle. That is unbelievable. So I'll just give the board a bit of a clean, just touch up, you know, where we put on the new caps, remove any flux, things like that. We'll get it back into its case so that we can reattach the CD drive, and I suppose we'll test that. Wouldn't be a CRG video if the Dremel didn't come out. I'm just using this to try and polish off the rust that's on this bottom shielding anyway. The top shielding is very badly rusted. I think with this one the best thing to do would be to rub it down and repaint it. The bottom though, it's only a couple of spots, so we'll just do what we can with this thing. I almost forgot, we need to recap the CD drive. There's a PCB in here with a couple of surface mount electrolytics in it, so we need to do that. I suppose the reason that I nearly forgot about it is because those caps were not included in the Amiga Kit cap kit. I'm not sure if I maybe missed an option on their site when ordering this, but maybe would have expected them to be included. Granted, if you're doing a 1200 and you order a cap kit, you don't get capacitors for the floppy drive, but all CD32s just have this model drive in them from Shinnon, bespoke to the machine, I understand, so it would have been nice to get the capacitors that we need. I'm not even sure if I have polymer caps in stock that would be suitable for this. We'll take it apart and have a look. Despite the fact that these drives are unique to the CD32, you can actually order the laser mechanism. You can still get that. You can get it from the likes of AliExpress, and it's not that dear. I think it's just about £10 or so. Now, it's been a while since I've been in one of these, but we need to remove the ribbon cable, and I think it's just that one screw. It's just little tabs then holding the thing in place. As you can sort of just get your nail in under it, and then it comes apart. Just one more screw then, holding the PCB itself. And we need to disconnect these wires, or do we? I thought this thing had surface mount caps in it. It doesn't. It only has through-hole caps. Must be a Sony mechanism actually, even though it says Shinnon on the top of it, because there's a couple of Sony ICs. In fact, I think that laser is a Sony part as well. With it being through-hole caps, to be honest with you, I think I'll just leave well enough alone. They very rarely give trouble. It's really just the surface mount caps from this era that give all the problems. They leak, causing untold damage. Granted, we got away with it on this machine, but through-hole caps, they're generally okay, so we'll just leave well enough alone. The other thing that we're definitely not touching is these trim pots. These are controlling the focus of the laser. You absolutely do not want to mess with that. That is all factory set. Granted, if you were replacing the laser module, well, yeah, you would need to adjust all this. I suppose we don't know if this laser works or not, but for now, I'm just leaving well enough alone. Let's put this back together and let's test it. we'll just plug this in now, because you can't really get to it once the mechanism is back in the case. One thing that we will do though is just grab a little bit of the silicone grease, and I'll just put some of it down that rail there. Maybe just do the same just in here on these gears, as the old stuff has been sitting there, you know, for 32 years, so I'm sure it's gone dry. Give the case a clean. I think you'll agree with me, it came up really well. Nothing I can do unfortunately about the scrapes on the CD32 badge here, but the plastics themselves, they almost look like new. That top shield, there it is after a lick of paint. Not the best paint job I have ever done, but just tidies it up a little bit compared to what it did look like. Only painted the top of it, haven't painted the bottom side. That's just to try and maintain some connectivity between the two shields, the grounding. I know some people will hate me for the fact that I painted this, but we couldn't leave it rusty the way it was. And I'm not exactly set up for re-chroming it. I think this is the best we could do. And unlike, say, the other wedge Amigas, which in those you can just do away with the top shield, in the CD32 you sort of need to keep it. If you do take the top shield out, you'll risk getting read errors on the CD drive. Speaking of which, we now need to reattach this thing into this cable restraint. This is going to be a nightmare. Can I put the cable in without pushing it back down? Oh, I think we've got it. That would be a first for me if I have got this in first time. Yeah. I'll have to do it on camera more often, because that is normally the fiddliest job out, and you normally cut the fingers of yourself on the metalwork here. Possibly a little premature putting all the screws back in this, because we haven't tested the CD drive yet, but I'm feeling hopeful that the fault there was just the missing 12-volt rail. So I think we'll start with an original game. I'm going to use Guardian, just because this will be a good test of both the Paula audio and also CD audio. Let's see if the machine still starts up. It's a bit of a shame that modern consoles don't have awesome jingles like that when they start up. Right, does the disc read? Drive lights on, disc is spinning. Certainly seems good so far. And it does indeed seem to be loading. Yep, there's the CD audio. Seems to be working fine. I love this game on the CD32. This should have been the killer app for this Wii console. This should have been the game that they pushed with it, rather than that other mess of a game. Microcosm, that one. I suppose that's the one they pushed because it's full of FMV, and at the time FMV was all the rage. We'll have a quick game of this, just test it using the A500 pad, which I modded, turning this into a CD32 pad. This game is also a good test of said controller input, because it's one of the few games on the console that actually uses all the buttons. And yeah, everything is working fine and sounding great. Perfect. How about we just try this, just to give the CD drive a bit of a workout, playing some of that FMV. Again, seems to be loading fine. There is the video playing. Yeah, there's nothing wrong with that drive. So once you fell asleep watching that intro, which just seems to go on forever, you are rudely awoken by being thrust into the game without any warning. It's not because this is an unreal FMV shooter that makes it a bad game. It's because it's impossible. Look at the shots coming off the enemies. They just track you no matter where you are on the screen. It is impossible to avoid being hit. With a little bit of rebalancing, this actually might have been quite a good game. I do enjoy a shooter, but it's just impossible. So we've tried a couple of originals. How about a copy, a CDR? This is the Bobble Bobble trilogy. Let's see if the drive will read that. No copy protection on the CD32, so you can't just burn ISOs and they will run. In fact, you can make your own ISO images of games. That's what this is. This was created by one of the enthusiasts in the CD32 scene. But will it read the CDR? Yep, does seem to be. The RF levels that you get back from a CDR disc are lower than what you would get from a press disc. So if you have a laser that's well used, sometimes it can struggle to read the CDRs, but this seems to be working fine. Just trying to put it into Bobble Bobble. Yep, there it goes. Although it seems slow to me. That music sounds really slow. Oh, and there's this like an NTSC version that's being played on a PAL machine. But in any case, it proves the point that the CDRs work fine. Well, that's it. One CD32 ready to go back to its owner. Hopefully be good for another 32 years of gaming. Bit of an odd fault in the end, wasn't it? With that joint on the board having no solder in it. How this machine ever left the factory like that, I will never know. Although there might have been a clue to that on the board. The quality control sticker on this. The last segment in it has no signature. So that would make me think that this machine escaped that last bit of quality control. Would certainly explain how it managed to leave the factory without any solder in that joint, and sort of makes you wonder how many other machines left the factory in a similar way. I've never seen that sort of problem before on any Commodore product, but if it's something you've seen before, please let me know down in the video's description. But equally, it would make you think that this console has always had problems reading discs or playing audio. Because even if that pin was making intermittent connection to the board, well, while it's making a connection, the drive will work and the audio will work, but it only needs to move a fraction and then your drive's not working and your audio's not working. But it's all fixed now, and along with those new capacitors, hopefully this thing will be good for the foreseeable future. But that's going to be it for the video. So thank you very much for watching. Just say a quick reminder about Amiga Belfast. We're meeting on the 1st of November at the May Wee building, and you can get your free tickets from the links in the video's description or from that QR code. It's a new user group meet for everything Commodore and Amiga in and around Belfast or Northern Ireland or further afield. Everyone is more than welcome, and I hope to see you there. But that's it for this one. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.